The sun blazed over Bakersfield High School, its rays bouncing off the warped asphalt of the basketball court, where the squeak of sneakers and the thud of a ball painted the late afternoon of August 25, 2024. Sweat glistened on Jamal Carter's lean frame as he darted past defenders, his wiry arms a blur of motion, hands guiding the ball with a grace that silenced the chatter of his teammates. At 17, he was the team's rising star, a junior, with college scouts already whispering his name, dreams of scholarships fueling every dribble. The court was his kingdom, a cracked slab of freedom in a town that often felt like a cage. His best shot of the day, a perfect arc from 20 feet, swished through the net, drawing whoops from the sidelines. Teammates slapped his back, their voices a chorus of hype. But Coach Larson, a squat white man with thinning hair and a perpetual scowl, stayed silent, his lips curling as he muttered under his breath about those kids getting too full of themselves. Jamal caught the words, a sting he'd heard before, but he shook it off, wiping his brow with the hem of his jersey. Practice ended at 5, the sky turning a bruised orange as he slung his gym bag over one shoulder, the weight of damp clothes and worn sneakers familiar, comforting. He waved goodbye to his crew, their laughter fading as he cut through the school parking lot, heading home on foot. Bakersfield wasn't kind to boys like him, tall and black, moving through streets where the wrong glance could spark trouble. He'd learned that early, taught by his mother Aisha's quiet warnings and the stories swapped in locker rooms. Tonight, though his mind was light, replaying the game, the rhythm of the ball still pulsing in his fingertips, he took a shortcut through Oak Ridge, a white neighborhood where picket fences gleamed and lawns stayed trimmed, a stark contrast to the peeling paint and overgrown yards of his own block. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue, a suburban hum that made him feel like an intruder. He kept his head down, hands in his pockets, the school uniform, a blue polo and khakis, his shield against suspicion. It wasn't enough. A patrol car rolled up beside him, its engine growling low, tires crunching gravel as it matched his pace. Jamal's stomach knotted, a reflex carved from years of hearing his mother's voice echo in his skull. Be polite, don't run, keep your hands out. The window slid down, revealing Officer Dale Pritchard, a thick-necked cop with a buzz cut and eyes like chipped flint, his badge glinting under the fading light. Where you headed, boy? Pritchard's voice was gravelly, edged with a sneer. That didn't wait for an answer. Jamal stopped, turning slow, deliberate, pulling his hands free to show empty palms. Home, sir. Just finished basketball practice. His tone stayed even, a tightrope walk between respect and fear. Pritchard leaned out, squinting at the uniform as if it were a lie. You look suspicious. Got ID? Jamal nodded, reaching for his pocket with measured care, fingers brushing his phone first. It's right here, sir. He pulled out his school ID, the plastic card trembling slightly as he held it up. Pritchard snatched it, barely glancing before tossing it into the dirt. That don't mean nothing. What's in the bag? Jamal's pulse quickened, but he unzipped it slow, showing the sweaty clothes, a water bottle, his sneakers. Just gym stuff, sir. Pritchard smirked, stepping out of the car, his bulk casting a shadow over the sidewalk. Looks like evidence to me. You stealing from that school? Jamal's jaw tightened, confusion spiking. No, sir. I'm a student there. Before he could finish, Pritchard grabbed the phone from his hand, slamming it against the car hood. Glass splintered, the screen cracking into a spider web as Jamal flinched, words catching in his throat. That's evidence too, Pritchard growled, tossing the wreckage aside. You're coming with me. Jamal's breath hitched, mind racing for an out, but he knew resistance was a trap. I didn't do anything, sir, he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. Pritchard's hand clamped his arm, twisting hard, forcing him to spin. Turn around now. Jamal complied, feet stumbling as Pritchard shoved him toward a brick wall lining the street, the rough surface scraping his cheek. The gym bag slipped, hitting the ground with a soft thud, contents spilling into the dust. 2 more cops emerged from the car, their boots heavy on the pavement. Faces blurred in Jamal's peripheral vision as panic clawed up his spine. Wait, he started, but a fist slammed into his back, knocking the air from his lungs. He staggered, catching himself against the wall, palms pressing into the gritty stone. Pritchard's voice hissed close. "You think you're special, huh?" A baton whipped through the air, striking Jamal's wrist with a wet crack, bone giving way under the force. Pain exploded, white-hot, searing up his arm as he gasped, knees buckling. Another blow landed, then another, each one targeting his hands, the tools of his dreams now splintering under metal and hate. He crumpled, hitting the pavement hard, the taste of blood sharp on his tongue as concrete bit into his skin. The cops circled, their laughter a dull roar over the ringing in his ears. One kicked the gym bag, sending it skidding into the gutter, sneakers tumbling free. "Should have stayed in your place," Pritchard spat, wiping sweat from his brow as if it were a chore well done. Jamal's vision swam, hands throbbing, fingers twitching uselessly as agony swallowed him whole. The world tilted, streetlights, flickering above like dying stars, casting jagged shadows over his broken form. Dust mixed with blood, a gritty paste coating his lips as he fought to breathe, each inhale a stab to his ribs. The cops didn't linger, their boots crunching back to the cruiser, voices fading into a smug murmur about teaching him a lesson. The car peeled away, tires screeching, leaving Jamal sprawled in the dirt, a discarded thing in their rear view. He lay there, chest heaving, mind struggling to catch up. The rhythmic bounce of the ball he'd mastered hours ago, now a cruel memory mocked by his ruined hands. A woman peeked from a porch across the street, her silhouette framed by lace curtains, eyes wide before she vanished, the fabric swaying shut. No one came, no sirens wailed, just the hum of a town that didn't care. Jamal's good hand clawed at the pavement, dragging himself upright, every move a fresh jolt of torment. His gym bag lay shredded, a testament to the life they'd tried to erase. He didn't cry out, wouldn't give them that, but something. Burned beneath the pain, a raw ember of defiance they'd never snuff out. The air thickened with gasoline fumes from a leaking pipe nearby, a bitter stench that clung to his clothes as he staggered to his feet, one thought piercing the haze. They didn't know who his father was. Minutes ticked by, the sun dipping lower, painting the sky a violent red as Jamal stumbled forward, cradling his mangled hands against his chest. Blood dripped, staining his uniform, a trail marking his path through Oak Ridge's pristine streets. A pickup truck slowed, its driver an older white man with a grizzled beard, staring before speeding off, dust kicking up in his wake. Jamal didn't expect help, not here, not now. He'd walked this route 100 times, a quiet trek home. After practice, but tonight it had become a battlefield, his body the casualty of a war he hadn't started. His mother's voice echoed again. Keep your head down, but he'd done that, followed every rule, and still they'd crushed him. The beating wasn't random, he realized, replaying Pritchard's words, the way they'd zeroed in on him with no cause, no crime. It was the uniform, the confidence in his step, the audacity to exist where they didn't want him. Bakersfield High's star player, reduced to a punching bag because his skin didn't match their streets. His hands, once his ticket out, now hung limp, bones shattered, dreams teetering on the edge of oblivion. He reached the edge of Oak Ridge, the line where white lawns gave way to cracked sidewalks and sagging porches, his neighborhood a breath away. A streetlight buzzed overhead, its glow weak, flickering, as if it too knew this place wasn't safe. Jamal's legs trembled, threatening to give out, but he pressed on, the ember in his chest flaring brighter. They thought they'd broken him, left him to rot, another black kid erased from their perfect little world. They were wrong. He didn't know how, didn't know when, but this wasn't the end. His father, Marcus, a name whispered in shadows. He'd never fully understood, would hear of this. And those cops, strutting away with their batons and smirks, had no idea the storm they'd unleashed. The pavement stretched ahead, endless and unforgiving, but Jamal kept moving, each step a promise they'd pay, and Bakersfield would never be the same. The Nevada desert stretched endless under a sky smeared with twilight, the air thick with the tang of gunpowder and the sharp crack of rifles echoing across a sprawling military base on the evening of August 25, 2024. Colonel Marcus Carter stood rigid atop a sandy rise, his broad frame clad in fatigues, scars crisscrossing his forearms like a map of battles won. At 45, he was a Delta Force legend, his name a hushed reverence among operatives who'd seen him turn chaos into victory. Tonight, he oversaw a drill, his piercing eyes tracking a squad breaching a mock compound, their movements a symphony of precision he'd honed over decades. Sweat beaded on his brow, not from the heat, but from focus. Every shout and maneuver, a thread in the tapestry of control he wove. A radio crackled at his hip, static slicing through the desert stillness, but he ignored it, barking an order to adjust a flank. Then his phone buzzed, a rare intrusion that jolted his spine straight, because only 2 people ever called during a mission, his commanding officer or his son. He yanked the device from his pocket, the screen flashing an unknown number from Bakersfield General Hospital, 500 miles away. His gut twisted, a primal instinct flaring as he answered, voice low and clipped, "This is Carter." A nurse's voice, tight with urgency, cut through. "Colonel, your son Jamal's been admitted. He's hurt bad. You need to come now." The words hit like shrapnel, splintering his calm as the phone trembled in his grip. "What happened?" he demanded, but she hesitated. "It's complicated. Just hurry." The line went dead, leaving a void filled only by the thud of his pulse. Jamal, his boy, 17 and fierce, was supposed to be at basketball practice, sinking shots, not lying in some hospital bed. Marcus spun, boots grinding sand, and strode toward his black SUV parked near the barracks, ignoring the puzzled stares of his squad. "Drill's over," he snapped to his second-in-command, a wiry sergeant who nodded without question. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as he peeled out. The base shrinking in his rear view, a 5-hour drive ahead he'd make in 3. The road blurred, headlights slicing through the night as Marcus pushed the speedometer past 90, the desert giving way to California's sprawling highways. His mind raced, piecing together fragments. Jamal walking home, safe as always, or so he'd thought. Had he crashed his bike? Been jumped by some punk? The possibilities gnawed, but none fit, not with that nurse's tone, edged with something unspoken. Bakersfield loomed at last, its neon signs flickering against a humid haze, the clock ticking past 10 when he screeched into the hospital lot. He stormed through the automatic doors, boots pounding tile, the sterile stench of antiseptic flooding his nostrils as he loomed over the reception desk. "Jamal Carter. Where is he?" His voice was a blade, cutting through the clerk's stammer, as she pointed to the second floor, room 204. He didn't wait for pleasantries, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his breath steady despite the fire in his chest. The door swung open, revealing a dim room where Jamal lay sprawled on a bed, tubes snaking from his arms, his face swollen with bruises, a deep purple ring circling one eye. His hands, those gifted hands Marcus had watched grow from clumsy fists to a baller's tools, were wrapped in thick bandages, twisted at angles that screamed ruin. Ribs rose unevenly under a thin gown, each breath a shallow rasp. And Marcus froze, the sight a punch to his core. His son, his pride, reduced to this. A nurse hovered, adjusting a drip, her face pinched as she whispered to another. "Another black kid roughed up, same old story." The words slithered into Marcus's ears, igniting a fury he'd buried since his own days dodging slurs in uniform. He stepped closer, voice a low growl. "Who did this?" The nurse flinched, eyes darting away. "I don't know, sir. Police brought him in, said he was trouble." Marcus's fists clenched, knuckles whitening as he leaned over Jamal, brushing a calloused hand against his son's arm, feeling the heat of fevered skin. Jamal stirred, eyelids fluttering, but didn't wake, lost in a haze of painkillers. The room spun, a battlefield Marcus couldn't fight with guns or strategy, and he hated it. He turned, catching a snippet of conversation from the hall. 2 cops lingering near a vending machine, their voices casual, careless. "Fix that punk good," one chuckled, a lanky figure with a shaved head popping a soda can. "Yeah, Pritchard said he won't be dribbling any time soon," the other, stockier, added, smirking as he crunched a chip. Marcus's blood turned to ice, then boiled, names locking into his mind like targets. Pritchard, the leader, the one who dared touch his boy. He stepped into the hall, towering over them, his presence a storm cloud swallowing their laughter. "You talking about my son?" His tone was lethal, quiet, the kind that made men rethink their lives. The cops froze, soda spilling as the lanky one stammered, Who are you?" Marcus didn't answer. Didn't need to, his glare peeling back their bravado until they scurried off, tails tucked. Back in the room, he sank into a chair beside Jamal, the plastic creaking under his weight, and stared at the bandages, the bruises, the truth sinking in. This wasn't an accident, not a random fight. This was deliberate, a message carved into his son's flesh, and those cops thought they'd get away with it. They didn't know him, didn't know the hell he'd rained down. His phone buzzed again, a text from an old Delta contact, a hacker named Reese. "Heard about Jamal. Need intel." Marcus typed back, "Everything. Names, badges, dirt. Now." He'd dig, unearth every secret, every lie, but as he sat there, he didn't see the bigger game, already in play. Pritchard and his crew weren't just laughing, they were scheming, huddled in a precinct basement miles away, falsifying reports with a precision Marcus would have admired if it weren't aimed at his son. "Drug dealer," Pritchard muttered, typing furiously, planting a fake rap sheet with Jamal's name, a bag of pills found in his gym bag, a story to bury the truth. They'd spin it, make Jamal the villain, a black kid who deserved it, and Marcus the grieving fool who'd never prove otherwise. The hospital hummed around him, a sterile cocoon of beeps and murmurs, but Marcus felt the shift, the enemy, moving while he sat still. He leaned closer to Jamal, whispering, "I'll fix this, son, they'll pay." His voice was iron, a vow etched in the air, but the weight of those bandages pressed on him, a reminder of how close he'd come to losing everything. Jamal's chest rose, fell, a fragile rhythm, and Marcus's mind sharpened. A soldier's. Focus locking in. He'd seen war, dismantled cartels, toppled dictators, but this was personal, a fight in his own backyard against men who hid behind badges. What had Jamal done to deserve this? Nothing, Marcus knew, nothing but be born black, in a town that hated him for it. The nurse returned, checking charts, her glance fleeting, afraid to meet his eyes. "He'll wake soon," she said, voice soft. "But those hands might never be the same. Might never be the same." The words echoed, a dagger twisting deeper because Jamal's hands were his future, his escape from Bakersfield's grip. Marcus nodded, jaw tight, holding back the raw building in his throat. He'd find Pritchard, find them all, and when he did, they'd learn what it meant to cross a Carter. But as he sat there plotting, the cops' lies were spreading, a web tightening around Jamal, and Marcus didn't yet see how far they'd go to protect their own. The night stretched on, a ticking clock, and somewhere in the shadows, the war he'd ignite was already brewing. What do you think about this? Comment number 1 if you agree those cops deserve what's coming, hit like if you're rooting for Marcus to tear them apart, and subscribe because you won't believe the fire he's about to unleash. Was it just a beating, or did they awaken a force they can't stop? The morning sun clawed its way over Bakersfield's jagged skyline on August 26, 2024, casting a harsh glare across the squat, grey bulk of the police station, its concrete walls stained with years of dust and neglect. Colonel Marcus Carter strode through the double doors at 8 sharp, his boots echoing on scuffed linoleum, a manila folder tucked under one arm like a loaded weapon. His face was a mask of stone, scars taut against his dark skin, but his eyes burned with a fury that made officers glance away as he passed. The air inside smelled of burnt coffee and stale paper, a bureaucracy bloated with secrets, and Marcus felt the weight of every stare, every whispered guess about the towering figure, in fatigues cutting through their ranks. He'd spent the night at Jamal's bedside, watching his son's bruised face twitch in restless sleep, the hospital's sterile hum a backdrop to the vow he'd made. Those cops would answer today. At the front desk, a young officer with a patchy beard barely looked up, fingers tapping lazily at a keyboard. "File a report online," he mumbled, voice flat, but Marcus slammed his military ID onto the counter, the plastic thudding like a gavel. "Chief Harold Vance, now." The kid's eyes flicked to the insignia, widened, and he scrambled for the phone, stammering into the receiver as Marcus stood unyielding, a storm contained in 6 feet of muscle. Minutes later, he was ushered down a fluorescent-lit hall, past, cubicles where cops shuffled papers or sipped from chipped mugs, their chatter dying as he loomed by. The chief's office waited at the end, its door ajar, a plaque reading H. Vance glinting dully under the lights. Chief Harold Vance sat behind a cluttered desk, a stout man in his late 50s with thinning grey hair and a ruddy face that spoke of too many late nights and cheap whiskey. His uniform stretched tight across a barrel chest, badges pinned like trophies, but his eyes, small and shrewd, betrayed a man who'd mastered the art of dodging blame. He rose as Marcus entered, offering a hand that Marcus ignored, dropping the folder instead, its contents spilling slightly. Grainy stills from a bodega's security camera time-stamped the previous evening, showing Jamal pinned against a brick, all hands raised, then crumpling under baton blows from 3 white cops led by Dale Pritchard. "This is my son," Marcus said, voice low, lethal, each word a bullet. "Your men did this. I want them gone." Vance's jaw tightened, but he scooped up the photos, flipping through them with a practiced calm, his fingers lingering on the image of Jamal's bloodied form sprawled in the dirt. "Serious accusations, Colonel," he said, leaning back, chair creaking under his weight. "We'll need to investigate." Marcus stepped closer, looming over the desk, his shadow swallowing the light. "You've got the evidence. Suspend them. Today." Vance exhaled, rubbing a meaty hand over his face, caught between the footage's stark truth and the loyalty he owed his men. He knew Pritchard, a hothead with a knack for handling the town's problems, and the others, loyal dogs, who'd follow him into any mess, but this, a Delta Force colonel's kid, was a grenade he couldn't ignore. "All right," Vance said at last, voice grudging. "Pritchard, O'Neill, and Kessler. They're off the streets pending review. You've got my word." He picked up the phone, barking orders to a lieutenant, his tone clipped, official, as if washing his hands of it. Marcus nodded once, a flicker of triumph sparking in his chest, the first crack in their armor. He'd forced their hand. Made. Then blink, and for a moment, he believed justice might claw its way free. "Make it stick," he said, turning to leave, the folder left behind like a challenge. Vance watched him go, lips pressed thin, already calculating how to spin this, how to protect his own. Marcus didn't see that, didn't hear the chief's muttered call minutes later to Pritchard. "Lay low, we'll fix it." The drive back to the hospital felt lighter, the sun climbing higher, baking the asphalt as Marcus replayed the win in his mind. Jamal would wake to news of a fight begun, not finished, but started right. He'd protect his boy, shield Aisha, rebuild what those bastards had tried to break. But Bakersfield had other plans. By midnight, the air turned thick with humidity. The Carter home, a modest ranch house on the edge of town, its paint chipped but porch swept clean, a sanctuary Aisha had carved from years of grit. Marcus had sent Jamal there after discharge, a nurse's reluctant nod his only assurance, and now Aisha sat inside, stirring a pot of gumbo, the smell of spices wafting through open windows. Jamal rested on the couch, hands bandaged, eyes heavy with painkillers, the TV droning local news about a heatwave. Then came the roar, a pickup truck screeching to a halt outside, its headlights slicing through the curtains. Marcus, dozing in an armchair, snapped awake, instincts flaring as glass shattered, a brick thudding onto the living room floor. Aisha screamed, dropping the ladle, as Jamal jolted upright, wincing, his voice hoarse. "What the hell?" Marcus was on his feet, peering through the blinds, and saw them, Pritchard, O'Neill, and Kessler, their silhouettes hulking in the dark, faces twisted with rage. They carried gas cans, sloshing liquid over a pile of Jamal's basketball trophies yanked from the garage, a lifetime of wins, now fuel for their hate. Pritchard struck a match, the flame flaring as he tossed it, fire leaping up with a whoosh, licking the night sky. "Stay quiet or he's next," O'Neill bellowed, lobbing a note through the broken window, paper fluttering to Aisha's feet. As she clutched Jamal, her breath ragged, Marcus snatched it, the scrawl jagged, "Back off or he burns." The fire spread, greedy tongues lapping at the porch, catching the wooden railing, smoke billowing thick and acrid. "Get back," Marcus roared, shoving Jamal toward the kitchen as Aisha stumbled, coughing, the heat searing through the walls. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from under the sink, spraying foam at the encroaching blaze. But it wasn't enough, the flames climbing higher, a wall of orange cutting off the front door. Neighbors peeked from windows across the street, silhouettes frozen, too scared to cross into cop territory, their silence a betrayal Marcus felt in his bones. Isha's gasps turned to sobs, her hands shaking as she gripped Jamal, pulling him toward the back door, but the fire jumped, a spark igniting a curtain, then the couch, a chain reaction trapping her near the stove. Marcus lunged, kicking through a side window, glass raining as he hoisted her out, her nightgown singed, skin blistering where embers had bitten. Jamal staggered after, bandages unraveling, blood seeping anew as he coughed, the smoke clawing his lungs. Marcus dragged them both to the lawn, collapsing as sirens wailed in the distance. Too late, always too late. The house groaned, flames swallowing the roof, a lifetime of memories reduced to ash as Pritchard's crew peeled away, tires squealing, their laughter a knife in the night. Marcus knelt in the grass, Aisha trembling beside him, Jamal's head in her lap, his broken hands limp, eyes wide with shock. The extinguisher lay discarded, foam pooling uselessly, and Marcus's triumph from the station curdled into ash, same as his home. He'd won a suspension, thought he'd caged them, but they'd struck back harder, faster, turning his victory to rubble. "They're not done," Aisha whispered, voice raw, and Marcus nodded, jaw clenching because she was right. This wasn't discipline, wasn't fear of justice. It was war, a message scrawled in fire and blood. They'd targeted his family, his heart, thinking they could break him by breaking them. The fire truck arrived, hoses blasting, but the house was lost, a skeleton of charred beams glowing against the dark. Marcus stood, brushing soot from his hands, the folder's images flashing in his mind. Jamal's beating, now this. He'd underestimated them, assumed a badge would bow to proof. But these men were feral, unbound by rules, fueled by a hate he'd seen in war zones, not homes. Aisha clutched Jamal, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face, and Marcus felt the shift, the soldier waking fully. They'd pay, not just for Jamal's hands, but for every second of this night. He didn't know how deep their rot. Rand didn't see the news vans already rolling toward the precinct, spinning a tale of arson by a troubled teen. But he'd find out, and when he did, Bakersfield would tremble. Midnight draped Bakersfield in a sticky shroud on August 26, 2024, the air heavy with smoke and the crackle of dying flames as the Carter family home smoldered, its charred bones glowing under a moonless sky. Colonel. Marcus Carter knelt on the scorched lawn, his fatigue streaked with soot, Aisha trembling beside him, her singed nightgown clinging to her blistered arms. Jamal lay sprawled in her lap, his bandaged hands limp, blood seeping through the gauze, his bruised face pale against the flickering firelight. The fire truck's hoses hissed, dousing what little remained, but the house was gone, a casualty of Pritchard's vengeance, and Marcus's chest burned with a rage he could barely leash. Sirens faded, replaced by the murmur of neighbors peeking. From behind curtains, their faces shadowed, too afraid to step into the chaos of cop territory. Aisha's sobs cut through the haze, her voice a ragged plea. "They won't stop, Marcus. They won't." He nodded, jaw tight, because she was right, and he'd been a fool to think a suspension would cage them. He rose, scanning the crowd, their silence a wall of cowardice he'd seen in villages too scared to defy warlords. "Get Jamal inside," he said, voice low, steady, pointing to the back door where embers still glowed, but the path was clear. Aisha staggered up, pulling Jamal with her, his legs shaky as he leaned into her, every step a wince. Marcus grabbed a blanket from the porch, draping it over them, then turned to the fire captain, a wiry man with a clipboard and tired eyes. "What started it?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. The captain shrugged. "Looks like arson. Gas cans out front. Cops'll handle it." Marcus's lips twitched, a bitter edge curling them, because the cops were the fire, and this man knew it, his glance darting away too quick. Inside, the kitchen stood intact, a pocket of normalcy amid ruin, the gumbo pot cold on the stove, its scent drowned by ash. Aisha settled Jamal on a stool, his breath shallow, eyes fluttering as painkillers warred with shock. Marcus paced, phone in hand, texting his Delta contact Reese. "Track Pritchard's crew. I need them now." The reply buzzed back. "On it." "Give. Me 30. He pocketed it, turning to Aisha, her hands shaking as she wiped Jamal's brow. "We're not safe here," she whispered, and he nodded, already planning a move to a motel, a bunker, anywhere but this graveyard of their life. The fire had been a warning, a promise of worse, and he wouldn't wait for the next blow. But Bakersfield moved faster. At the hospital, Jamal had woken hours earlier, his mind foggy but restless, the nurse's words, "You're lucky to be alive." A hollow echo as he stared at his mangled hands. He couldn't stay, couldn't let. His parents faced this alone, so he'd slipped out, crutches clicking against tile, ignoring the orderly's shout. Now discharged but fragile, he'd insisted on coming home, and Marcus regretted letting him, seeing him wilt under the weight of loss. "I'm fine," Jamal had rasped, but he wasn't, and Marcus knew it, the boy's spirit fraying even, as his body held. At 12:30, Jamal stood, wobbling. "I need air," he muttered, hobbling toward the backyard, crutches sinking into ash-dusted grass. Marcus watched, torn, but let him go, thinking a moment's peace might steady him. It didn't. An alley flanked the house, a narrow strip of shadow where garbage cans rattled in the breeze, and Pritchard's crew waited, their pickup idling, headlights off. O'Neill, a lanky brute with a shaved skull, spotted Jamal first, his sneer glinting as he nudged Kessler, a squat figure with a boxer's build, and Pritchard, the ringleader, whose buzz cut gleamed under a street lamp's flicker. They'd come. To finish what the fire started, their suspension a slap they'd turn into a slaughter. "Look at the cripple," Pritchard hissed, stepping out, batons dangling from their belts like trophies. Jamal froze, crutches trembling, heart hammering as he backed toward the house, but the alley boxed him in, a trap he'd walked into blind. Pritchard lunged, ripping the crutches free, wood clattering as Jamal stumbled, hands useless to break. His fall. He hit the gravel hard, a grunt escaping as Kessler's boots slammed into his side, ribs creaking under the force. "Thought you'd snitch," O'Neill snarled, swinging his baton, the crack of it against Jamal's shin, a sickening snap that drowned his scream. Blood trickled from his lip, dirt grinding into his skin as Pritchard knelt, grabbing his hair. "Tell your daddy to back off or we burn more than your house," Jamal spat, defiance flaring. "He'll kill you," and Pritchard laughed, a cold, hollow sound before smashing his fist into Jamal's jaw, teeth rattling loose. They didn't stop, boots and batons raining down, a symphony of hate that turned the alley into a slaughter pen. Jamal curled in, protecting his head, but his legs took the brunt, bruises blooming purple, bones threatening to give. Neighbors. Heard, windows cracking open, but no one moved, fear locking them in place, a town complicit in its silence. The beating lasted minutes, an eternity, until Pritchard stepped back, panting, "Leave him." "He's done." They kicked his crutches into a dumpster, climbed into the truck and roared off, tires spitting gravel, certain they'd broken him for good. Marcus heard the thud, a dull echo from the yard, and bolted outside, Aisha's cry trailing him. "Jamal!" He found his son crumpled near the alley's mouth, blood pooling beneath him, face a mask of welts, legs twisted, hands oozing red through shredded bandages. "No," Marcus growled, dropping to his knees, cradling Jamal's head. His boys. Breath a faint wheeze. Aisha stumbled up, sobbing. They came back, her voice breaking as she clutched Marcus's arm. He lifted Jamal, carrying him inside, laying him on the kitchen floor, the linoleum cold against his skin. "Call an ambulance," he barked. But Aisha's phone was ash, and his was dead, the fire's chaos stripping them bare. He tore a towel from a drawer, pressing it to Jamal's wounds, blood soaking through fast, his hands steady but mind racing. "Hold on, son," he whispered. Jamal's eyes fluttering, a weak nod his only reply. The rescue, pulling Aisha from the flames, had felt like a save, a defiance of their attack, but this second beating, crushed it, a brutal reminder they'd never relent. Marcus's vow hardened, a blade sharpening in his chest, because this wasn't just war, it was personal, a vendetta etched in his son's blood. He didn't hear the news vans rolling into town, didn't see the headlines brewing, Troubled teen torches. Own home. A lie Pritchard's crew had fed the press. A smear to bury Jamal deeper. Aisha knelt, tears dripping onto Jamal's face. "Why us?" she whispered. And Marcus had no answer, only fury. He'd saved her, kept the fire from claiming them, but they'd struck again, faster, harder, targeting Jamal when he was weakest. The ambulance wailed in the distance, finally coming, but too late to erase this night. Marcus stood as medics burst in, their shouts a blur, watching them load Jamal onto a stretcher, his boy's body limp, spirit dangling by a thread. "They'll pay," he said, voice a promise, a soldier's oath. But the weight of it pressed heavier now because they'd turned his win into ash, then blood, and he hadn't seen it coming. The medics whisked Jamal away, Aisha trailing her, steps unsteady, and Marcus lingered, staring at the alley, the dumpster, the scattered crutches. He'd underestimated them, thought a suspension would hold, but they were rabid, unbound by law or fear, their hate a wildfire he couldn't douse alone. The news flickered on a neighbor's TV through an open window, a reporter's voice chirping. Arson suspected to be the work of Jamal Carter, a local delinquent, and Marcus's fists clenched, knuckles popping. They weren't just after his son's body, they wanted his name, his future, every piece of him erased. He'd make them regret it, but as the ambulance lights faded, he didn't know how far they'd go next, how deep their rot sank. What's your take on this brutality? Comment number 1. If you think Marcus should have seen this coming, hit like. If you're raging at these cops' audacity, and subscribe because the payback's about to get wild. Can Marcus save Jamal from their lies, or will the system swallow them whole? The Bakersfield courthouse loomed like a fortress under a slate-grey sky on August 29, 2024, its stone facade cracked and weathered, a monument to a justice system that creaked under the weight of its own flaws. Colonel Marcus Carter strode through the arched entrance at 9 in the morning, 3 days after the fire, and Jamal's second beating, his boots pounding the marble floor with a rhythm that turned heads. His fatigues were swapped for a crisp, black suit, tie knotted tight, but the scars on his hands and the steel in his gaze marked him as a soldier still. A battered briefcase swung at his side, stuffed with evidence, the bodega footage, hospital photos of Jamal's mangled hands, and a scorched note from the arson, its scrawl a taunt he'd turned into a weapon. The air inside smelled of polish and old paper, a sterile mask over the rot he'd come to expose. Jamal rested at home, discharged again, his legs bruised but unbroken, hands still wrapped, Aisha hovering like a sentinel. Marcus had left them with a neighbor's borrowed pistol and a promise, "I'll end this today." The hallway buzzed with clerks and lawyers, their whispers trailing him as he reached courtroom 3, where Judge Evelyn Monroe presided, a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for cutting through lies. Marcus filed a lawsuit against the Bakersfield PD, naming Pritchard, O'Neill, Kessler, and Chief Vance, demanding accountability for the beating, the fire, and the alley ambush. He stood alone, no attorney, his voice, his own counsel, a Delta-trained precision in every word. The courtroom was half full, a mix of reporters and locals, their murmurs a low hum as Judge Monroe banged her gavel, silver hair glinting under fluorescent lights. "Colonel Carter, state your case," she said, her tone firm but curious, peering over glasses perched on her nose. Marcus stepped forward, briefcase snapping open, and laid out the footage first, a projector flickering to life, showing Jamal's initial beating in grainy detail, hands raised, then shattered, blood pooling as Pritchard smirked. Gasps rippled. Through the gallery, a reporter scribbling furiously. But Marcus pressed on, voice steady. This was unprovoked. "My son, 17, walking home from practice. Then this." He held up the arson note, its edges curled black. "They burned. Our house. Beat him again, they're still free." Vance sat in the defendant's seat, flanked by a slick lawyer in a pinstripe suit, his ruddy face flushed but composed, eyes darting to Pritchard's crew in the back row, their uniforms swapped for civvies, smirks barely hidden. The lawyer rose, "Your Honor, this is circumstantial. No proof links my clients directly to these acts," Marcus countered, slamming down hospital records. "Bruises match baton marks. Witnesses saw their truck at the fire." Judge Monroe leaned forward, studying the evidence, her brow furrowing as the lawyer stammered, "The boy's a known troublemaker, arson his own doing." Marcus's fist clenched, but he held, letting the judge's gaze linger on the footage, the note, the truth. She ruled fast, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I'm issuing a restraining order. Officers Pritchard, O'Neill, and Kessler are barred from contact with the Carter family, effective immediately. This court will see a full trial." The gavel struck, a sharp crack, and Marcus exhaled, a flicker of victory warming his chest. He'd pinned them, forced the system to blink, and for a moment he saw a path to justice, a shield for Jamal and Aisha. Vance's lawyer protested, "This is premature," but Monroe shut him down. "Evidence speaks. Sit." Marcus nodded to her, a rare respect in his eyes, and left, the briefcase lighter, his stride firm as he exited into the humid morning, believing he'd turned the tide. Night fell fast, a thick blanket of heat settling over Bakersfield by 10. The Carter family holed up in their ruined home, windows boarded, the kitchen their last bastion. Jamal sat at the table, picking at a sandwich Aisha had made, his hands trembling as he gripped the bread, pain a constant shadow. Marcus stood by the sink, washing a glass, replaying the judge's words, the restraining order a fragile win he'd cling to. "They can't touch us now," he said, more to himself than them, but Aisha's eyes, red-rimmed, stayed wary. "You?" "Sure." He nodded, forcing confidence. "Law's on our side." Jamal managed a weak smile. "Guess I'm safe, huh?" Marcus ruffled his hair, a rare softness breaking through. "Damn right." Then the world shattered. Tires screeched outside, a spotlight blasting through the boarded window, splintering wood as a megaphone blared, "Jamal Carter, come out with your hands up." Marcus dropped the glass, it shattering on the tile, and peered through a crack, seeing squad cars flashing reds and blues, 6 officers in riot gear, Pritchard at the helm, his buzz cut glinting under streetlights. "What the hell?" Marcus growled, turning to Jamal, who froze, sandwich falling. "I didn't do anything." Aisha grabbed him, pulling him back. "They can't, you said—" But Marcus knew. The order meant nothing. A paper shield against their hate. The door burst open, hinges ripping free, and Pritchard stormed in, baton drawn. "You're under arrest, punk." "Assaulting an officer." Marcus lunged, blocking him. "You're violating a court order." Pritchard smirked. "New evidence. He jumped Kessler last night." A lie, blatant, but the others piled in, shoving Marcus aside, their boots thudding as Jamal stumbled, hands raised. "I was here." They didn't listen. Cuffs snapping around his wrists, tearing at his bandages, blood welling as Aisha screamed, "Stop!" Marcus swung, catching O'Neill's jaw, but Kessler tackled him, pinning him to the floor. "Stay down, soldier boy." Jamal was dragged out, his cries echoing, "Dad!" Outside a mob waited, white faces twisted with rage, spurred by the news lie, Jamal Carter, arsonist, a tax cop. Bottles flew, shattering against the house, glass raining as slurs painted. "The night, go back where you came from." They swarmed, fists pounding the walls, spray cans hissing as red letters bled across the boards. "Anna out." Marcus broke free, staggering to the porch, but Jamal was gone, squad car peeling away, lights fading into the dark. The mob turned on, the house, bricks crashing through windows, a Molotov cocktail arcing, flames licking the doorstep before Marcus stomped it out, smoke stinging his eyes. He stood amidst the wreckage, chest heaving, the restraining order a joke, his victory ash in his mouth. Aisha clung to him, sobbing. They took him, and Marcus's fists balled, blood dripping from a cut on his knuckles. The mob dispersed, their laughter a taunt, leaving the house a scarred shell, slurs glaring under flickering streetlights. He'd won in court, thought he'd caged them, but they'd flipped it, framed Jamal, turned the town against them. Assaulting an officer, Pritchard had said, a lie so bold it mocked the judge's ruling, and Marcus hadn't seen it coming, hadn't braced for this. The news vans rolled in, cameras flashing, a reporter chirping, local teen arrested after violent assault, and Marcus's gut twisted because they'd planned this, spun the web while he sat smug in his win. Jamal, battered and broken, was back in their hands, the system their weapon, sharpened by hate. A neighbor, an old man with a cane, shuffled over, voice low. They said he started it all, burned his own place. Folks believe it." Marcus turned, eyes blazing. "They're lying." The man nodded. "I know, but they don't care." He hobbled off, leaving Marcus alone with Aisha, the house a war zone, their boy stolen. Marcus kicked a shattered bottle, glass skittering, and pulled Aisha inside, shutting the door against the night. "I'll get him back," he said, voice fair growl, but doubt gnawed because this wasn't just Pritchard's crew anymore. It was Vance, the precinct, a town complicit in its silence. The restraining order dangled useless, a scrap of paper they'd torched with their raid. He'd trusted the law, a mistake he'd never make again, because they'd struck harder, faster, turning his son into a scapegoat while he watched. The kitchen clock ticked, each second a stab, and Marcus paced, mind-racing because Jamal was in a cell, and the mob's hate was just the start. They'd pay, but how deep did this go? The county jail squatted on the edge of Bakersfield, a hulking slab of concrete, bathed in the sodium glow of security lights on the evening of August 29, 2024, its barbed wire glinting like teeth against a bruised sky. Colonel Marcus Carter pulled into the lot at 6, the engine of his black SUV rumbling low, his suit swapped back for fatigues, a soldier's armor for the fight ahead. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles raw from the mob's assault hours earlier. The courthouse win a bitter memory as Jamal's arrest replayed in his mind. Pritchard's smirk, the cuffs tearing at his son's bandages, Aisha's screams, echoing into the night. The jail loomed, a fortress of lies, and Marcus stepped out, boots crunching gravel, a hacked police radio log burning a hole in his pocket, proof the assault was a fabrication. He'd get Jamal out, end this nightmare, or so he thought. Inside, the air stung with bleach and sweat, a fluorescent buzz overhead as Marcus stormed the intake desk, slamming down his ID and a wad of cash, $3,000 scraped from savings Aisha had hidden in a coffee can. "Jamal Carter, bail him out," he barked, voice a blade slicing through the clerk's yawn. The woman, a gaunt figure with stringy hair, squinted at the screen, then at him. "Assault charge. Bail set at $2,000. You sure you got enough?" Marcus shoved the money forward. "Count it." She did, slow, deliberate, as if testing him. But the log was his ace, a recording from a Delta contact, Reese, who'd cracked the precinct's comms. Static, then Kessler's voice. "Kid didn't touch me. Plant it anyway." Marcus played it low, the clerk's eyes widening. "This says he's innocent." She hesitated, then stamped the release. "Take it up with the judge." Minutes ticked, each one a claw in Marcus's gut, until Jamal shuffled out, escorted by a board guard. His bandages frayed, blood spotting the gauze, legs bruised purple from the alley beating. His face was a map of welts, one eye swollen shut, but he managed a crooked grin. "Dad." Marcus pulled him close, careful of his wounds, the weight of his son's frame a lifeline in the storm. "You're safe now," he said, voice thick. Guiding him to the SUV, the jail's shadow shrinking behind them. Aisha waited at a motel 3 miles away, a cheap room with peeling wallpaper and a flickering neon sign. Her call to Marcus frantic, "Bring him quick." He drove. Jamal slumped beside him, the radio silent. Bakersfield streets a blur of dust and neon. At the motel, Aisha flung the door open, her cry a mix of relief and rage as she hugged Jamal, his wince swallowed by her embrace. "They can't touch you now," Marcus said, locking the door, the log replaying in his mind, a shield he'd wield tomorrow. Jamal sank onto the sagging bed, Aisha fetching water, and for 30 minutes they breathed, a fragile peace settling over the room. "And we beat them," Jamal rasped, sipping slow. "Right?" Marcus nodded, for now, his hand ruffling Jamal's hair, a rare smile breaking through. The TV flickered on, a game show's laughter a stark contrast to the war outside, and they ate cold sandwiches, a makeshift celebration believing the tide had turned. Then hell broke loose. At 10, headlights slashed through the motel curtains, a black van skidding into the lot, its doors flying open as Pritchard, O'Neill, and Kessler spilled out, faces twisted with fury, cattle prods crackling in their hands. Marcus leapt up. "Get back!" he shouted, shoving Jamal behind him. But the door splintered under a boot, wood raining as Pritchard charged in. "You think you're done?" Aisha screamed, lunging for the phone, but O'Neill grabbed her, slamming her against the wall, her head cracking plaster. Marcus swung, fist connecting with Kessler's jaw, bone crunching, but Pritchard jabbed the prod into his side, electricity searing through him, dropping him to his knees with a grunt. Jamal stumbled, hands useless. "Leave! Them alone!" he yelled, but Kessler snatched him, dragging him out, his legs kicking air as Aisha clawed at O'Neill, nails drawing blood. Marcus roared, surging up, tackling Pritchard, but the prod struck again, volts frying his nerves, vision blurring as Jamal vanished into the night. Aisha broke free, sobbing, "They took him," as Marcus staggered to his feet, the room spinning, the van's engine growling outside. He stumbled to the window, seeing taillights fade, a live stream flickering. On his phone, hacked by Reese, Jamal, bound in a warehouse, Pritchard's face looming, "Tell your daddy to drop it or you're meat." The warehouse was a rusted tomb on Bakersfield's outskirts, its walls peeling, the air thick with oil and decay as Jamal hung from a chain, wrists bleeding, the prod's tip glowing red. Pritchard paced, camera rolling. "You're live, kid. Smile." He jabbed, sparks flying, Jamal's scream tearing through the feed as O'Neill laughed. "He'll break soon." Kessler cranked the voltage, burns blistering Jamal's chest, his body jerking, eyes rolling back, but he spat. "You're dead." Defiance a thread holding him together. The stream cut, a warning to Marcus, a promise of pain, and in the motel he watched, fists smashing the table, wood splintering, Aisha's wails a backdrop to his rage. Marcus grabbed his phone, texting Reese, "Find that warehouse, now." The reply buzzed, 10 miles east, old steel plant. He turned to Aisha, her face streaked with tears. "I'm getting him." Voice a vow, but her eyes begged, "They'll kill him." He didn't answer, grabbing a knife from the motel drawer. The bailout a fleeting glimmer, now ash, because they'd struck back, not with fists but with torture. A cruelty that dwarfed the fire, the alley, the arrest. The TV droned, oblivious as Marcus stormed out, the night swallowing him. His mind a war drum because Jamal's screams weren't just pain. They were a call he'd answer with blood. The livestream had been a blade, cutting deeper than any baton, a public humiliation meant to break them both. And Marcus hadn't seen it coming, hadn't braced for this escalation. He'd bailed Jamal out, exposed their lie, thought he'd won a breath, but they'd turned it into a nightmare, a spectacle of hate broadcast to terrorize. The motel room stood silent, Aisha clutching the bed, the knife's glint in Marcus's. Hand a promise, but doubt gnawed. Could he reach Jamal before they snapped him completely? The warehouse waited, a trap he'd walk into, because they weren't stopping, weren't scared. Their power, a noose tightening around his son. Pritchard's. Crew didn't flinch, didn't falter. Their suspension a joke, the restraining order a rag they'd torched with this move. They'd taken Jamal from under his nose, turned freedom into chains, and Marcus's chest burned, a father's love warring with a soldier's wrath. The steel plant loomed in his mind, 10 miles of dark road ahead, each second a gamble, because they'd demanded he drop the case, drop the fight, or lose his son forever. He'd saved Jamal from jail, thought he'd shielded him, but this was a war he'd underestimated, a racial vendetta that laughed at his victory. The SUV roared to life, tires screeching as Marcus peeled out, Aisha's cry fading, "Bring him back!" He would or die trying, because the glimmer of hope, the bailout, the log had been a mirage, and now Jamal paid the price, his screams a siren Marcus couldn't ignore. The night stretched, endless, the warehouse a shadow on the horizon, and he didn't know what he'd find, didn't know how far they'd go, but he'd tear it down brick by brick to get his boy. What's your gut saying? Comment number 1 if you're screaming for Marcus to rip them apart. Hit like if this torture's got you boiling. And subscribe because the reckoning's about to explode. Will Marcus storm in and save Jamal, or has Pritchard's crew already broken him beyond repair? Dawn broke over Bakersfield's outskirts on August 30th, 2024. A pale streak of light clawing through the haze as Colonel Marcus Carter's SUV screeched to a halt outside an abandoned warehouse, its rusted shell squatting amid overgrown weeds and shattered glass. The old steel plant loomed, a decaying relic 10 miles east of town, its walls streaked with grime, the air thick with the stench of oil and rot. Marcus stepped out, boots sinking into damp earth, his fatigues damp with sweat, a tactical knife strapped to his thigh and a pistol tucked at his waist, relics of a Delta life now turned personal. His phone buzzed, the live stream still looping in his mind. Jamal's screams, Pritchard's sneer, the cattle prod's crackle, a nightmare broadcast to break him. Reese's text had pinned the location, and Marcus moved, a shadow honed by years. Of war, every step a promise to end this. The warehouse doors hung ajar, hinges groaning as he slipped inside, the gloom swallowing him, only slivers of light piercing broken skylights above. Chains dangled from the rafters, swaying in a faint breeze, and there in the center Jamal hung, wrists bound, blood dripping from burns blistering his chest, his head lolling, eyes half open but defiant. Pritchard paced before him, cattle prod, glowing while O'Neill leaned against a crate, grinning, and Kessler adjusted a camera, the red light blinking, streaming live to terrorize. "He's still kicking," Pritchard muttered, jabbing again, sparks flying as Jamal's body jerked, a choked gasp escaping his cracked lips. Marcus's blood boiled, but he held, crouching behind a stack of rusted barrels, his breath steady, a predator sizing prey. He counted. 3 targets, armed, distracted, their arrogance a chink he'd exploit. Pritchard turned, prod raised. Time. To end it. And Marcus struck, a blur of motion, knife flashing as he closed the gap. He slammed into O'Neill first, blade slicing the man's arm, blood spraying as the cop howled, tumbling into crates with a crash. Kessler spun, fumbling for his gun, but Marcus was faster. Pistol whipping him across the temple, skull cracking as he dropped, camera toppling, the feed cutting to static. Pritchard swung the prod, volts arcing, but Marcus dodged, grabbing the chain holding Jamal, snapping it with a single wrench, his son collapsing into his arms, groaning, "Dad, stay down," Marcus growled, lowering Jamal behind a steel beam, then turning as Pritchard charged, "You're dead, soldier." The prod grazed Marcus's shoulder, a jolt searing through, but he roared, tackling Pritchard, fists pounding, nose shattering under his knuckles, blood pooling on the concrete. Pritchard flailed, gasping. "You can't win," but Marcus pinned him, knife at his throat. "Confess." He yanked his phone, hitting record, and Pritchard, choking, spat, "Yeah, we beat him, burned the house, framed him. So what?" Marcus slammed his head down, concrete cracking, and stood, leaving him limp, alive but broken. O'Neill staggered up, clutching his arm. "You're screwed." But Marcus kicked his legs out, bone snapping, silencing him with a scream. Kessler twitched, out cold, and Marcus cut Jamal free, hoisting him over his shoulder, his son's weight a tether to sanity. Blood slicked his hands, Jamal's burns raw, but his pulse held, faint but steady. "I've got you," Marcus whispered. Moving fast, the warehouse a tomb he'd leave burning if he could. Outside, the SUV waited, dawn's light creeping higher, and he laid Jamal in the back, tearing fabric from his shirt to bind the worst wounds, each breath a fight to keep him alive. He drove, tires chewing gravel, heading for a safe house 20 miles north, a Delta stash he'd kept off the books, a cabin in the hills stocked with medkits and ammo. The phone buzzed, Reese's voice crackling. "Stream's down, but I've got the confession. Leak it?" Marcus grunted. "Now." And minutes later, the recording hit the web, Pritchard's words a Molotov cocktail online, outrage igniting. As comments flooded, "Cops did this? Justice for Jamal." Protests flared in Bakersfield streets by noon, signs waving, voices roaring, a tide Marcus had sparked without firing a shot. He reached the cabin, a weathered shack hidden by pines, and carried Jamal inside, laying him on a cot, cleaning burns with antiseptic, his hands steady despite the tremor in his soul. Jamal stirred, eyes fluttering. "We did it?" Marcus nodded. "They're exposed. You're safe." Aisha arrived, borrowed car rattling up the dirt path, her cry breaking as she rushed in, hugging Jamal, tears soaking his shirt. "Thank God," she whispered. And Marcus felt it, a victory carved from blood and grit, the world turning against Pritchard's crew at last. He stepped outside, breathing pine-scented air, the confession echoing online. thinking he'd won. That hell was over. The cabin creaked, a sanctuary, and for an hour they rested. Jamal sipping water, Aisha tending him, Marcus watching the horizon, believing the tide had turned. Then the earth shook. A blast ripped through the morning, a fireball blooming where the cabin stood, windows shattering, wood splintering as Marcus dove, shielding Jamal and Aisha with his body, debris raining like shrapnel. Smoke choked the air, flames licking the pines, and Marcus coughed, ears ringing, dragging them from the wreckage, his mind racing. How? The safe house, his fortress, was ash, and he saw it, a drone buzzing overhead, its payload spent, a hit ordered, by Chief Vance, who'd watched the confession leak and struck back. "Move!" Marcus yelled, pulling them into the trees, Jamal stumbling, Aisha's arm bleeding from a gash, the cabin a pyre behind them. They hid, crouching in underbrush. The drone circling, its hum a taunt as Marcus scanned the sky, pistol drawn, useless against this. Vance's voice crackled from a radio dropped in the blast. "You think you're untouchable, Carter. Your boy's next." The threat landed, a gut punch, because Marcus had saved Jamal, exposed the truth, thought he'd broken them, but they'd escalated, turned his win into rubble. A bombing that dwarfed the fire, the torture, a declaration of war from a system that wouldn't bend. Jamal wheezed, "They won't stop!" And Marcus nodded, jaw clenching, because he'd underestimated their reach, their ruthlessness, again. The forest swallowed them, pine needles crunching as Marcus led them deeper, away from the wreckage, the drone's buzz fading. Aisha clutched Jamal, her voice a whisper. "Where now?" Marcus didn't answer, mind spinning, because nowhere was safe. Not anymore. He'd unleashed hell, taken Pritchard down, turned the public, but Vance had countered, a hitman's precision, racial hate, fueling a strike that didn't care who saw. The confession burned online, protests raged, but this was personal, a message in fire and steel. "We'll bury you." Marcus's hand tightened on the pistol, blood dripping from a cut on his brow. The rescue a fleeting triumph, now dust. He'd fought wars, dismantled enemies, but this was different, a beast with badges and bombs, and he'd walked Jamal right, into it thinking a safe house could hold. The trees loomed, a fragile shield, and Marcus checked his phone, battery low, Reese's last text glowing. Vance hired a pro. Watch your back. Too late, he thought, the blast a scar on his soul because they'd targeted his family again, struck when he dared to win. Jamal's burns bled through the makeshift bandages, Aisha's gasps a rhythm of fear, and Marcus moved, guiding them toward a creek, a plan forming, because he'd hit back, harder. But first, they had to survive. The cabin's embers glowed. In the distance, a beacon of their defeat, and Marcus's chest heaved, a soldier's rage warring with a father's dread. He'd saved Jamal from the warehouse, thought he'd turned the tide, but Vance's bomb flipped it, a counterstrike that shook the earth, proving they'd kill to keep their power. The creek gurgled ahead, a lifeline, and Marcus pushed on. Every step a vow, because this wasn't over, not while he breathed. They'd pay, but the cost was rising, and he didn't know how much more Jamal could take, how much more he could lose before the end. Noon scorched Bakersfield's downtown on August 30th, 2024. The sun a relentless hammer pounding the cracked pavement as protests erupted, a sea of bodies swelling outside the police station, their voices a thunderous roar against the humid air. Colonel Marcus Carter crouched in the pine-shadowed hills 20 miles north, the safe house's smoldering ruin a bitter memory, his fatigues torn, blood crusting a gash on his arm where debris had bitten. Jamal huddled beside him, burns weeping, through makeshift bandages, his breath shallow while Aisha pressed a damp cloth to his forehead, her own arm bleeding from the blast, eyes darting to the sky where the drone had vanished. The creek gurgled nearby, a lifeline they'd followed to escape, but safety was a ghost. And Marcus's mind churned, the warehouse rescue a fleeting win now ash, Vance's bombing a slap he hadn't seen coming. His phone buzzed, screen cracked, but a live Reese's message glowing, confessions viral, thousands watching. Marcus opened the app, the grainy video looping. Pritchard's bloodied face, "We beat him, burned the house, framed him," a confession ripped from his throat, now a wildfire online. Comments flooded. "This is sick. Cops are monsters." And by 11 the streets had ignited, protesters spilling from every corner, signs jagged with fury. "Justice for Jamal. End police lies." News vans clogged Main Street, cameras rolling as chants shook the station's walls, a tide Marcus had sparked. With one leak, he'd saved Jamal, turned the world against them, and now it showed, a victory he could taste, sharp and real. He led Jamal and Aisha to a rusted pickup stashed by the creek, a Delta favor from years back, its keys taped under the wheel well. "We're going in," he said, voice rough, helping Jamal into the cab. His son's legs trembling, Aisha climbing beside him, her nod firm despite the fear in her eyes. The engine coughed to life, tires chewing dirt as they rolled toward town. The protest's roar growing louder, a beacon pulling them in. By 12:15 they reached the rally's edge, a parking lot near City Hall, where thousands massed, fists pumping, voices raw. Marcus parked, scanning the crowd, spotting a makeshift stage, a megaphone crackling as a young woman shouted, "We won't let them bury Jamal Carter." He stepped out, lifting Jamal, Aisha steadying him, and pushed through, the crowd parting, gasps rippling as they saw the boy's burns, his bloodied hands, a living testament to the video's truth. "That's him!" someone yelled, phones rising, filming as Marcus climbed the stage, Jamal leaning on him, Aisha at his side. "He took," the megaphone voice booming, "my son was beaten, burned, tortured by cops who think they're above us. You've seen the proof, they can't hide anymore." The crowd erupted, cheers shaking the ground, signs waving higher. "No more silence. Pritchard must pay." Jamal raised a fist, weak but fierce. "I'm still here," he rasped, and the roar doubled, a wave of hope Marcus felt in his bones. For an hour they stood, the public turning, a tidal shift he'd forced with blood and grit. Reporters swarmed, mics thrusting. "Colonel, what's next?" He stared them down. "Justice," and the word landed, a vow echoing as cameras flashed, the story spreading. Delta hero's son brutalized, fights back. Marcus believed it, thought the tide had finally crested, the confession a blade they couldn't dodge. Aisha whispered, "They're with us," and Jamal nodded. "We won," his voice faint but alive. Marcus scanned the faces, black, brown, white united, a force he'd unleashed, and for a moment he let himself hope, let the weight lift, thinking they'd broken the beast. Then the trap sprang. At 1:30 a cop car rolled past, slow, deliberate, Pritchard's smirk glinting through tinted glass, free despite the confession, the restraining order, the suspension, a taunt Marcus didn't catch. Minutes later, a SWAT van screeched in, doors bursting as armored figures stormed the rally, rifles raised. "Jamal Carter, you're under arrest," the crowd screamed, scattering, but Marcus shoved Jamal behind him. "He's innocent." A SWAT officer, face-masked, barked, "Riot incitement, weapon possession," and yanked a backpack from the stage, planted there, a gun gleaming inside, a frame-up so blatant it mocked the truth. Jamal's eyes widened. "That's not mine," but they grabbed him, cuffs snapping, tearing at his burns, blood welling as Aisha lunged. "No!" Marcus swung, fist cracking a helmet, but batons rained, forcing him back, the crowd surging, chaos erupting as tear gas hissed, choking the air. Jamal was dragged to the van, his cries lost in the roar, and Marcus roared, "You've got nothing!" Then a crack split the din. A sniper's shot from a rooftop, bullet grazing his arm, blood spraying as he stumbled, pain searing but not stopping him. He dove behind a car, Aisha beside him, her scream a knife. "They're killing us!" The SWAT team retreated, van peeling out, Jamal gone, the gun a lie Vance had planted, turning the rally into a snare. Marcus pressed his sleeve to the wound, blood soaking through, his mind racing. How? The confession had turned the public, protests raging, but Vance flipped it, framing Jamal as a rioter, a thug, the gun a prop to bury him deeper. The crowd thinned, gas clearing, bodies sprawled. Signs trampled, and Marcus saw it, phones filming, headlines shifting. Rally turns violent, teen arrested. Aisha clutched him. They planned this, and he nodded, jaw clenching because they had. A counter-strike that dwarfed the bombing, the torture, a public betrayal that twisted his win into chains. He'd thought the people's rage would shield them, but Vance wielded it, a racist lie swallowing Jamal whole. The sniper's perch was empty, a shadow fleeing, and Marcus stood, arm throbbing, the rally a battlefield now, tear gas lingering like a shroud. "We've got to move," he said, pulling Aisha up, her hands shaking, eyes locked on the van's fading lights. The gun, the arrest, the shot, it was orchestrated, a message in blood and steel. You can't win. He'd turned the public, thought. He'd broken their grip, but they'd struck back, harder, faster, turning hope into handcuffs, his son a pawn in their game. The street smoldered, protesters coughing, retreating, and Marcus felt the shift, the tide he'd raised crashing against him. He led Aisha to the pickup, engine rumbling as they slipped away, the crowd's roar fading, replaced by sirens and silence. "They'll kill him," Aisha whispered, and Marcus didn't answer because she might be right. The SWAT raid, a death sentence dressed as law. He'd saved Jamal from the warehouse, ignited the streets, but this was a beast. He hadn't tamed, a system that fed on black lives, and he'd walked into its jaws. The sniper's bullet burned, a warning he'd ignored, and now Jamal was gone. The rally a trap, the gun a lie that mocked his fight. The pickup rolled north, Bakersfield shrinking, but Marcus's mind stayed locked on the station, the rooftop, Vance's smirk behind it all. He'd turned the public, thought he'd won their hearts, but they'd twisted it, a racial vendetta that didn't care who saw. Jamal's burns, his screams, his fist raised, all fuel for their hate, and Marcus hadn't seen the depth, the reach until now. The road stretched endless, and he gripped the wheel, blood dripping, because this wasn't over, not while he breathed. But the cost was climbing, and he didn't know how to shield his son from this storm. What's your verdict on this twist? Comment number 1 if you're stunned. Vance flipped the script so fast. Hit like if you're aching for Marcus to strike back, and subscribe because this war's about to get darker. Can Marcus outsmart a system that's already rigged the game, or is Jamal's fate sealed in their hands? Midnight cloaked Bakersfield in a restless hush on August 30th, 2024. The police headquarters a monolith of glass and steel glowing under floodlights, its corridors buzzing with the hum of late-night shifts. Colonel Marcus Carter crouched in the shadows of a service alley 2 blocks away, his fatigues torn, the sniper's graze on his arm crusted with blood, a dull throb he ignored. Aisha waited in the pickup, parked in a junkyard half a mile north, her breath shaky as she clutched a borrowed phone. Jamal's arrest at the rally replaying in her mind, the planted gun a lie that had stolen him again. Marcus's jaw clenched, the protest's roar a fading echo. His public win turned to ash by Vance's frame-up, and now he hunted the truth. A soldier slipping into enemy lines. He ditched the pickup after the rally, moving on foot. Reese's tip burning in his pocket. Vance meets someone big tonight, precinct basement. Marcus scaled a fire escape, metal creaking under his boots, reaching a vent overlooking a locked room below, its steel door guarded by a lone cop dozing at a desk. He pried the grate free, silent, dropping into a crawl space, dust stinging his eyes as he inched forward, the murmur of voices rising through the floor. A recorder hummed in his hand, a Delta tool small enough to hide, and he pressed it to a seam, capturing every word as Chief Harold Vance's growl cut through. "Carter's a problem. We end this now." Marcus froze, peering through a crack, seeing Vance, ruddy face slick with sweat, pacing before a man in a tailored suit, silver hair gleaming under dim bulbs. Mayor Clifton Reese, Bakersfield's kingpin, his smile cold, calculating. "So you've botched this, Harold," Reese said, voice smooth as ice. "The kid's alive, the father's a ghost, and that confession's everywhere." Vance slammed a fist on a table, maps and files scattering. "Pritchard's locked up, but Carter's got the streets. We need him gone." Reese leaned back, fingers steepled. "Then we kill them. Stage it as a gang war. Jamal's a thug, Marcus a rogue vet. No one'll dig deeper." The recorder whirred, Marcus's pulse steady, but rage boiling. Because this wasn't just Pritchard's crew, wasn't just Vance, it was the top, a conspiracy rooted deep. Racial hate a weapon they wielded without shame. "Jamal's in holding," Vance said. "We move him tonight, plant more, finish it." Reese nodded. And the father? Vance smirked. Manhunt, terrorist label. He's done. They mapped it out, precise, chilling. A staged shootout. Bodies dumped, headlines spun, a black family erased to protect their empire. Marcus's grip tightened. The truth a grenade he'd lobbed back, but he needed out. Needed to breathe before they sniffed him. He retraced his path, vent groaning as he hauled himself up, dropping to the alley with a soft thud, boots sinking into mud. The precinct buzzed behind him, oblivious, and he sprinted, weaving through backstreets, the recorder a lifeline he'd wield. At the junkyard, Aisha leapt from the pickup. "What did you find?" He played it, Reese's voice chilling the night, her eyes widening. "The mayor?" Marcus nodded. "It's bigger than we thought." He texted Reese, his Delta hacker, got Vance and Mayor Reese plotting murder. Leak it. The reply buzzed. Sending to every journalist now. By 1, the recording hit. A bombshell online. Reese's polished drawl damning. Kill them. Stage it as a gang war. Newsrooms erupted. Headlines screaming. Mayor and chief in murder plot. Protests reigniting. Horns blaring as Bakersfield woke to its rot. Marcus drove Aisha to a diner 10 miles west, a greasy spoon with flickering lights, where they watched the chaos unfold on a TV above the counter. "They're finished," Aisha whispered, hope flickering, and Marcus believed it, thought he'd cracked their core, the conspiracy exposed, a win to claw Jamal back. The waitress, a wiry woman with tired eyes, nodded. "Whole town's talking. Your boy's a hero." Marcus's chest eased. The recorder's way to victory, Vance and Reese cornered at last. Then the counterstrike hit. At 2, sirens wailed citywide, a megaphone blaring from choppers overhead. Marcus Carter, terrorist suspect, wanted dead or alive. Aisha's cup clattered, coffee spilling. "What?" Marcus grabbed the remote, flipping channels, every station flashing his face, a mugshot from his Delta days captioned, "Armed and dangerous." Reese's voice followed, smooth on air. "A rogue soldier's destabilizing our city. We'll protect Bakersfield." The diner's patrons stared, whispers rising, and Marcus pulled Aisha out. "They've flipped it." The manhunt roared. Cop cars flooding streets, drones buzzing, a net tightening as Vance turned the truth into a noose. They bolted to the pickup, engine growling as Marcus swerved onto back roads, headlights off, the town a hunter's ground. "They're lying," Aisha said, voice trembling, and Marcus nodded. "They're scared. This is desperation." He aimed for the hospital where Jamal had been moved after the rally, a hunch gnawing. They'd hit there next. At 2:30, he parked a block away, Bakersfield General's lights glowing, a fortress he'd breach. "Stay here," he told Aisha, slipping out, pistol drawn, moving low through shadows, the manhunt's pulse throbbing in the air. He reached a side entrance, lock picked in seconds, Delta instincts guiding him to the 3rd floor, room 309. Where Jamal lay, guarded by 2 cops chatting over coffee, Marcus crept closer, overhearing, "Mayor says he's a loose end," and his blood ran cold, because they'd killed Jamal to bury this. Then the sky lit up, a drone's hum piercing the night, a missile streaking, smashing into the room with a deafening roar. Glass exploded, flames blooming, and Marcus dove, heat singeing his back as the blast threw him against a wall, ribs cracking, breath stolen. The cops screamed, one burning, the other fleeing, and Marcus crawled. "Jamal!" Smoke choked him, debris raining, but he reached the bed, finding it empty, a decoy pillow shredded. Jamal gone, moved moments before by chance or fate. He staggered, up coughing blood, the hospital a war zone, alarms shrieking as staff ran, patients wheeled out. Aisha's scream echoed from outside. "Marcus!" And he stumbled to her. The pickup's door flung open, her face pale. "He wasn't there?" He shook his head. "They missed him, but they're hunting us." The drone circled, a second strike looming, and Marcus floored it, tires screeching, weaving through chaos as copters spotlighted streets. The manhunt a beast unleashed. Vance's voice crackled on radio waves. "Carter's a terrorist, endangering lives. A lie that turned his exposure into exile. Jamal a ghost in their grip." The conspiracy, laid bare, had been his checkmate, or so he'd thought. But Reese and Vance countered, branding him a monster, a black man hunted as a threat, the recording twisted into proof of his rage. The hospital smoldered. A near miss that spared Jamal but broke Marcus's plan, because they'd escalated bombs over batons, a war on his family that didn't care who saw. Aisha clutched his arm. "Where is he?" And Marcus didn't know. The precinct, the jail, a hole they dug, every option a dagger. He'd unveiled their rot, turned the world against them, but they'd struck back, harder, faster, a manhunt and a bombing that dwarfed all before. The pickup roared north, city, lights fading, Marcus's mind a storm because Jamal was alive somewhere but trapped, the system a machine grinding them down. He'd thought the truth would free them, end this, but it had unleashed a fury he couldn't outrun, racial hate a fuel they'd burn to ashes. The road stretched, dark and endless, and Marcus gripped the wheel, blood dripping, because he'd exposed them, yes, but at what cost? The drone's hum faded, but the choppers loomed, spotlights hunting, and he didn't know how to save his son from this, how to fight a war where every wind bled them dry. Dawn bled across the Bakersfield horizon on August 31st, 2024. A thin crimson line piercing the grey as Colonel Marcus Carter crouched in the shadows of an abandoned quarry 15 miles south of town, its jagged cliffs looming like sentinels over a dust-choked pit. His fatigues hung in tatters, blood crusting the sniper's graze on his arm, ribs aching from the hospital blast, but his eyes burned, unyielding, a soldier at war. Aisha knelt beside him, her arm bandaged with a torn shirt, breath shallow, while Jamal's absence gnawed at them both, the manhunt's choppers still buzzing faintly in the distance. The pickup rested hidden under a tarp, its engine cold, and Marcus gripped his pistol, the conspiracy recording a weight in his pocket, Vance and Reese's plot to kill them now a public fire he'd fanned, but not enough to save his son. He'd rallied allies overnight, old Delta brothers who'd answered his call. 3 shadows slipping into the quarry under cover of dark. Torres, a wiry explosives expert with a scar across his cheek. Jackson, a hulking sniper with a shaved head. And Reese, the hacker, lean and twitchy, his laptop glowing as he tracked Vance's task force. "They're moving, Jamal," Reese whispered, screen flickering. "Convoy's 10 minutes out, Quarry Road." Marcus nodded, jaw tight, because the hospital bombing had missed, but Vance wouldn't, not now, not with the world watching. "We hit them here," he said, pointing to a choke point, cliffs narrowing the path, a trap he'd turn on them. Torres rigged charges along the ridge, dust puffing as he worked, while Jackson perched high, scope glinting, and Reese jammed their comms static as shield. Marcus briefed them, voice low. "They've got my boy. We take them alive, get Vance talking." The plan was simple. Ambush. Disarm, extract. A Delta playbook he'd run 100 times in deserts and jungles, but this was Bakersfield, his backyard turned battlefield, racial hate the enemy's fuel. Taisha clutched a knife. "I'm with you." And he didn't argue, her eyes steel, a mother's fury matching his own. At 5:45, headlights pierced the dawn, 3 squad cars rolling slow, tires crunching gravel, Vance's bulk in the lead, shotgun across his lap. Jamal slumped in the back, hands cuffed, burns raw, head bowed but alive, a sight that steadied Marcus's pulse. "Now," he hissed, and Torres triggered the charges, a blast rocking the quarry, rocks tumbling. To block their retreat, dust choking the air as Jackson fired, tires popping, cars swerving. Marcus leapt, pistol blazing, bullets punching through windshields, glass shattering as cops ducked, shouts lost in the roar. Aisha darted, knife slashing a tire, her scream a war cry. "For Jamal!" Vance bellowed. "Take them!" And his task force, 6 men in riot gear, spilled out, rifles spitting fire, but Marcus moved, a ghost in the chaos, dropping one with a headshot, blood spraying gravel, then tackling another, snapping his arm, bone cracking. Torres lobbed a flashbang, light blinding, ears ringing, and Jackson picked. Off 2 more, bodies crumpling, their guns clattering. Reese hacked a car's radio, Vance's voice looping, "Kill them all," a confession Marcus recorded, a second nail for their coffin. Aisha reached Jamal, cutting his cuffs. "I've got you," her hands trembling as he staggered. "Mom!" Marcus closed on Vance, dodging a shotgun blast, buckshot shredding a boulder as he lunged. Pistol whipping the chief's jaw, teeth flying, then pinning him, knee on his chest. "Talk." Vance spat blood. "You're dead anyway." But Marcus pressed the barrel to his temple. "Try me." The recorder rolled, Vance choking. "Reese ordered it, the beatings, the bombs, wipe you out, blame the gangs." Marcus stood, dragging him up. "You're done." And the fight ended. 5 cops down, 1 moaning, Vance cuffed, a victory carved in dust and blood. Jamal leaned on Aisha, alive, free, and Marcus exhaled, the quarry a graveyard of their power, the confession a blade he'd wield again. "We've got him," he said, voice rough, Torres clapping his shoulder, "like old times." Jackson grinned. "They didn't see us coming," and Reese packed his gear. "This'll bury them." Marcus believed it, thought he'd broken. Their spine, the task force shattered, Vance's words a noose tightening. He led them to the pickup, Jamal limping, Aisha steadying him, the dawn brightening. A fleeting hope that this was the end, the breaking point where they'd fall. Then the sky darkened, a roar rising, not choppers but engines, dozens of pickups and vans storming from Bakersfield, a militia in camo and masks, rifles gleaming, tires kicking dust as they swarmed the quarry's edge. Marcus froze. What the hell? And Reese's laptop beeped, a news feed flashing. Mayor Reese declares emergency, blames Carter for chaos. A megaphone blared, "This is for our town." And flames erupted, Molotovs arcing into the cliffs, explosions rocking the ground as the militia advanced. A tidal wave of hate unleashed by Reese's call. They didn't stop at the quarry, peeling off toward town, and Marcus watched, helpless. As smoke rose from Bakersfield's black neighborhoods, fires blooming, screams echoing on the wind. Aisha clutched Jamal. "They're burning everything." And he nodded, eyes wide, because this wasn't retaliation. It was genocide, a counterstrike that dwarfed the manhunt, the bombs, a racial purge to punish his win. The militia torched. Homes, shops, churches, slurs shouted, "Clean it out." And Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from Jamal's best friend, Tyrell. "They're at my place, help." Then silence, the line dead. And Marcus knew, Tyrell gone, swallowed by the flames. He'd won the shootout, captured Vance, thought he'd ended it. But Reese flipped the board, turned his victory into ash. A militia loosed to erase them all. "We've got to move," Marcus said, dragging Vance to the pickup. Torres rigging a smokescreen, Jackson covering as bullets whizzed, pinging steel. Jamal coughed. "Tyrell..." And Marcus's chest tightened, because he'd failed him. Failed them. The breaking point not theirs but his, a win that birthed a nightmare. Aisha's eyes blazed. "They're killing us," and he nodded because they were. A town turned executioner, racial hate a torch they'd lit. The pickup roared, smoke billowing as they broke through, militia firing wild, Torres tossing a grenade, a blast scattering them, buying seconds. Marcus drove south, quarry fading, Bakersfield burning in the rear view, Vance groaning in the back. "Reese'll finish you." Marcus slammed his fist into the dash. Not yet. But doubt gnawed. Because this was bigger, deeper. A war he'd sparked but couldn't contain. The shootout had been his stand, Vance's confession a hammer. But Reese countered, a militia tearing black lives apart, a genocide to bury his truth. They reached a ravine, hiding the truck under brush, Jamal wheezing, Aisha tending him, her hands shaking as smoke thickened the air. Marcus checked the recorder, Vance's words clear. A weapon still, but the cost crushed him. Tyrell's death a scar, the neighborhoods aflame, a wound he'd opened. "I thought we'd won," Jamal rasped, and Marcus didn't answer because he had for a moment. But they'd struck back harder, faster, a racial vendetta that didn't care who died. Torres scouted, "They're spreading," and Jackson loaded his rifle. "We hit back?" Marcus nodded. "We have to." But his mind reeled, because this wasn't just Vance, not just Reese. It was Bakersfield, a town complicit in its hate. The ravine sheltered them, a fragile pause, and Marcus knelt by Jamal. "You're alive, that's enough," but it wasn't. Not with Tyrell gone, not with flames eating their world. He'd broken their task force, thought he'd snapped their spine, But Reese's militia was a beast he hadn't tamed, a counterstrike that turned his win into slaughter. The quarry's dust settled, bodies cold but Bakersfield burned. A racial purge he'd unleashed by daring to fight. Vance smirked. "You did this." And Marcus gagged him, because he hadn't, not this, but the guilt gnawed, a soldier's victory drowning in blood he couldn't stop. Dusk settled over Bakersfield on August 31st, 2024. A blood-red glow staining the sky, as smoke curled from the black neighborhoods, torched by Reese's militia, the air thick with ash and the wail of distant sirens. Colonel Marcus Carter gripped the wheel of the tarp-covered pickup, his fatigues shredded, blood seeping from the sniper's graze on his arm, ribs bruised from the quarry fight. Aisha sat beside him, her bandaged arm trembling, eyes fixed on the horizon where flames danced, while Jamal slumped in the back, burns weeping through gauze, breath ragged but defiant. Chief Vance lay bound next to him, gagged with a rag, his ruddy face bruised from Marcus's fists, a living trophy of the shootout win now soured by the militia's genocide. The ravine had sheltered them, but not for long, and Marcus drove, weaving through backroads, the recorder in his pocket heavy with Vance's confession, a weapon he'd wield one last time. City Hall loomed ahead, a squat brick building flanked. By Oaks, its steps swarmed with protesters, their chants a ragged pulse against the chaos. Signs splintered but raised. "Reese must fall. Justice now." Marcus parked a block away, the quarry victory a fleeting spark he'd fan into a blaze. "We end this here," he said, voice a growl, helping Jamal out, Aisha steadying him, her nod sharp despite the fear etching her face. Torres, Jackson, and Reese, his Delta crew, flanked them, weapons ready. Faces grim as they hauled Vance, his grunts muffled, a prize to dangle before the world. The militia's roar echoed, engines revving as they torched more streets, but Marcus pushed forward. The crowd parting, gasps rising as they saw Jamal's wounds, Vance's cuffs, a story told in blood and steel. He climbed the steps, Jamal leaning on him, Aisha at his side, and seized a bullhorn from a protester, its crackle cutting through the din. "This is Marcus Carter," he bellowed, voice booming. "My son was beaten, burned, hunted by men who run this town. Here's their chief confessing." He held up the recorder, playing Vance's words. "Reese ordered it. The beatings, the bombs, wipe you out." And the crowd roared, fury shaking the Oaks. Phones flashing as the confession streamed live, a viral wave crashing online. Reese's face appeared on a news van screen, pale, stammering, "Lies or lies," but the crowd drowned him. "Resign! Resign!" A chant that rattled the building's windows. Marcus turned to Torres. "Get it everywhere." And the hacker nodded, uploading the recording to every platform, comments exploding. "Reese is done. Save Jamal." Protesters surged, some scaling the steps, others blockading streets. A revolt Marcus had ignited, the militia's fires a backdrop to their rage. He dragged Vance forward. "Tell them," ripping the gag, and Vance spat. "Reese runs it all." Before Marcus shoved him down, the chief sprawling, a symbol broken. Jamal raised a fist. "They can't stop us." His voice weak but piercing, and the crowd cheered. A tide Marcus rode, thinking he'd won. The conspiracy shattered, Reese's empire crumbling under public wrath. Inside City Hall, lights flickered. Staff fleeing as protesters pounded doors, and Marcus stormed in, crew behind him. Vance dragged along, the recorder still broadcasting. He reached the mayor's office, kicking the door wide, Reese cowering behind a desk, silver hair disheveled. "You can't do this," Marcus loomed. "It's done," and played the confession again, leave feed spiking, millions watching as Reese's mask cracked. "You've got nothing," he hissed, but the roar outside said otherwise, windows rattling as the crowd pressed. Closer, a revolution in motion. Torres zip-tied Reese. "You're finished," and Marcus nodded, victory sharp in his chest. The final stand a blow they couldn't dodge. Then the trap closed. Engines roared, louder, closer, the militia breaching the blockade, pickups crashing through, camo-clad figures spilling out, rifles blazing as they surrounded City Hall, a ring of steel and hate. Marcus spun. "Get down!" shoving Jamal and Aisha behind a couch, bullets punching through glass. plaster raining as protesters screamed, scattering. Torres fired back, Jackson sniping from a window, 2 militia dropping, blood pooling on the steps. But they kept coming. A swarm Reese had unleashed, his smirk glinting. "You thought I'd fall alone." The firefight erupted, chaos swallowing. The hall Marcus returning fire, pistol barking, each shot a defiance of their numbers. Reese lunged, breaking free, and Marcus tackled him, fist slamming, desk cracking under their weight. "Call them off!" Reese laughed, bloodied. Too late. And Marcus snapped his arm, bone giving, the mayor howling as he pinned him. "End it," Reese rasped. "Never." But the crowd rallied, some grabbing rocks, bottles, fighting back, a war on 2 fronts. Jackson shouted, "They're too many!" And Torres tossed a smoke grenade, haze choking the air, buying seconds as Marcus dragged Reese up. "You're dead!" and slammed him into the wall, skull thudding, the mayor slumping, out cold. A die, king fallen at last. He turned, firing through the smoke, militia closing, their shouts a wall of slurs. "Wipe them out!" Jamal crawled. "Dad, here!" And Marcus reached him, Aisha shielding him, the hall a battlefield, blood slicking the floor. He killed Reese, thought he'd ended it. The confession live, the crowd rising, a victory to seal the war. Then a shadow moved Pritchard, freed by corrupt guards bursting from a side door, eyes wild, a pistol in hand. "You don't win!" Marcus spun. "No!" But the shot rang, a crack splitting the din, bullet tearing into Jamal's chest, blood blooming as he gasped, collapsing, Aisha's scream a blade through the haze. Marcus roared, lunging at Pritchard, tackling him, fists, pounding, skull cracking against tile. "You bastard!" Pritchard laughed, choking. "Worth it." And Marcus snapped his neck, a wet snap, the cop limp, dead, but too late. He crawled to Jamal, cradling him. "Stay with me," blood soaking. His hands, Jamal's eyes fluttering. "Dad!" Aisha sobbed, pressing the wound. "No, no." But the militia pressed, bullets whizzing, Torres dragging them back. "We've got to go." Marcus lifted Jamal, staggering, the hall a tomb, Reese down, Pritchard gone, but his son dying, the triumph ash in his mouth. Sirens wailed, real ones now, feds rolling in, lights flashing as the militia faltered, some fleeing, others dropping under fire, the crowd surging anew. "Save him!" Marcus stumbled outside, Jamal limp, blood dripping, Aisha beside him. Her cries a storm, the feds shouting, "Clear the way!" He'd won, broken Reese, turned the tide, but Pritchard's shot flipped it, a racial vendetta that stole his son when victory was his. The steps swam, protesters parting, phones filming, and Marcus knelt, Jamal's breath fading. "I've got you." A lie he clung to, because this wasn't the end. Couldn't be. Not after all this. The militia retreated, feds swarming, cuffing. Stragglers Reese dragged out unconscious, Vance hauled off, the confession still streaming. A nation watching as Bakersfield burned, justice a flicker in the chaos. Marcus's crew fought, holding the line, but his world narrowed to Jamal, blood pooling. The hall's wreckage a backdrop to his loss. He'd stormed in, thought he'd sealed it, the final stand a blow they'd feel forever, but they'd struck. Back, harder, faster. A bullet that broke him when he'd broken them. A medic ran up. "We've got him!" prying Jamal free, and Marcus let go, hands shaking, Aisha collapsing beside him, the night swallowing his win. The feds secured the scene, militia scattering, but Marcus didn't move, blood staining his knees, the recorder silent. Its truth a hollow echo. He'd killed Reese, ended Pritchard, turned the crowd, but Jamal's chest stilled, a cost he hadn't braced for. Racial hate a beast that didn't die with its masters. The steps glistened, wet with blood and tears, and Marcus stood, Aisha, clinging because this was it, the final stand, a victory that bled him dry, and he didn't know what came next, didn't know if Jamal would breathe again, but he'd fight, always, for what was left. Night swallowed Bakersfield on August 31st, 2024, the air thick with smoke and the tang of blood as Colonel Marcus Carter knelt on the shattered steps of City Hall, his fatigues soaked in Jamal's blood, the chaos of the final stand a fading roar around him. Aisha clung to his side, her sobs a jagged rhythm, her bandaged arm trembling as she pressed a hand to Jamal's chest, where Pritchard's bullet had torn through, blood pooling dark and relentless. The boy's eyes fluttered shut, his breath a faint wheeze, then nothing, a stillness that ripped Marcus's soul raw. Medics swarmed, their shouts a blur. "He's flatlining!" as they shoved Marcus back, defibrillators humming, paddles pressing, jolts rocking Jamal's limp frame. The crowd hushed, protesters frozen, phones filming, feds cuffing militia stragglers. The scene a tableau of loss etched in flickering lights. Marcus cradled Jamal's head. "Stay with me, son," voice breaking, a soldier's steel buckling. Under a father's dread, Aisha's wails piercing the night. "Don't leave us!" The medics worked, frantic, no pulse. And Marcus staggered, fists pounding the steps, concrete biting his knuckles because he'd won. Broken Reese, ended Pritchard, turned the tide, only to lose everything. A stretcher rolled up, Jamal lifted, blood dripping, and Marcus followed. Aisha stumbling beside him, the hospital a blur of sirens and flashing reds. Bakersfield General's doors slamming open as they rushed him in. The ER buzzed, sterile and cold, doctors barking, "Trauma Bay 3!" And Marcus watched, helpless, as Jamal vanished behind curtains, machines beeping, then flatlining, a monotone scream that stopped his heart. A doctor emerged, face grim. "We did everything. He's gone." Aisha collapsed, her cry a primal wound, and Marcus caught her, legs buckling. The world tilting because this couldn't be. Not after the quarry, the rally, City Hall, every fight to keep him alive. "No," he growled, shoving past, tearing. Into the bay, Jamal's body still, chest unmoving, blood staining the sheet, hands mangled, burns raw. A boy who'd defied hell now silent. Marcus sank beside him, hands shaking. "I failed you," a whisper lost in the hum. Aisha clutching his shoulder, tears soaking his fatigues, the medics retreating, their pity a weight he couldn't bear. He'd stormed the hall, killed Reese, thought he'd sealed it, but Pritchard's shot stole it all. A racial vendetta that didn't die with its masters. Then a shadow moved, Torres slipping through the chaos, his wiry frame tense, eyes sharp. "Marcus, outside. Now." Marcus froze, Aisha's sobs pausing. "What?" Torres grabbed his arm. "Trust me." And Marcus followed, numb, dragging Aisha, the ER fading as they stumbled into the lot, smoke curling from the city's wounds. A black van idled, unmarked, its door sliding open, and Jackson stepped out, hulking and silent, ushering them in. Marcus hesitated. "Jamal," but Torres pushed. "Get in." And they did, the door slamming, engine growling as it peeled away, Bakersfield shrinking, the hospital aglow in the rear view. Inside, Reese, the hacker, sat at a console, laptop. Glowing, he's not dead. Marcus's head snapped up. "What?" Aisha gasped. "Don't lie." And Reese turned the screen, a feed flickering. Jamal, alive in a bunker, tubes in his arms, burns bandaged, chest rising slow but steady. Marcus blinked. "How?" Torres leaned in. "Staged. We swapped him. Decoy body, fake flatline. They'd never stop hunting him." Jackson nodded. "My call. Medics were ours, Delta plants. He's critical, but breathing." Aisha sobbed. Relief crashing. "He's alive?" And Marcus gripped the seat, mind reeling, because this twist, this lie, had saved his son when he'd thought all was lost. The van rolled north, a secret base 50 miles out, a concrete slab buried under Scrubland, Delta's last bastion Marcus had forgotten. "Why didn't you tell me?" he rasped, and Torres met his gaze. "No time. They'd bomb again, kill him for real. We moved him when the feds hit." Reese added, "Vance's confession, Reese's plot. It's with the feds now. Leaked everything. Recordings, footage, militia orders." Marcus exhaled, the weight shifting because Jamal lived hidden, a secret they'd guard with their lives, and the truth, his weapon, was out, a blade he'd plunged deep. They reached the bunker at midnight, a steel door grinding open, air cool and sterile as Marcus stepped in, Aisha beside him, finding Jamal on a cot, monitors beeping, a Delta medic nodding. Stable, but bad. Bullet missed his heart by an inch. Marcus knelt, hand brushing Jamal's brow. "You're safe," voice thick, Aisha clutching his arm, tears falling. "My boy." Jamal stirred, eyes cracking. "Dad?" And Marcus nodded. "Right here. The twist a lifeline." Pritchard's. Shot a lie they'd outrun. The medic whispered, "He'll recover slow." And Marcus felt it. A victory snatched from despair. Racial hate defied by this ruse. Outside, Torres briefed him. Feds raided the precinct, arrested Vance, militia leaders, anyone tied to Reese. Your leaks hit hard. Jackson added, "Protests are nationwide now. Bakersfield's burning for justice." Marcus stood staring at the scrubland, the recorder empty, its work done, because he'd exposed them, broken them, and this, Jamal's survival, was the real win, a secret shield against their wrath. "What now?" Aisha asked, and Marcus turned. "We hide him. Let them think he's gone. Then fight." She nodded, steel in her spine. A mother reborn. Days blurred, Jamal mending in the bunker. Marcus pacing, Aisha tending, the world shifting outside. September 3rd dawned, news screaming. Vance convicted, militia dismantled, feds storming Bakersfield, Reese's body cold. Pritchard's death a footnote, the recordings a hammer that cracked their empire. Marcus watched, TV flickering, protests swelling, cities chanting Jamal's name. A symbol they thought dead, now alive, a spark he'd pass on. He sat by Jamal. "You're stronger than me." And Jamal grinned, weak. "Learned from you." His hands scarred, dreams shifted, but spirit unbroken. The medic cleared him on September 5th. He'll walk, fight again. And Marcus planned, because this wasn't over, not while the system breathed its roots deep, racial hate a weed he'd uproot. "I'm done," he said, voice firm. "You take it, son." Jamal nodded. "I will." A vow in his eyes. A new warrior born from this hell. Marcus stepped outside, Aisha beside him, the bunker ceiling. Jamal safe, hidden, a secret base now his ground. He'd fought, bled, won. And this twist, this survival, flipped the war, passing the torch to a son who'd rise where he'd fall. Bakersfield burned, protests a wildfire. September 6th, igniting marches nationwide, signs blazing. Jamal lives, a rumor they'd stoked. The decoy's death, a myth that fueled revolt. Marcus leaked more. Reese's files, Vance's orders, every shred he'd gathered. Feds swarming, arrests piling, the system cracking under public rage. He stood on a ridge, Aisha's hand in his, watching choppers fade. The fight his no more. Jamal's now, a revolution brewing in bunkers and streets. He'll change it, she said, and Marcus nodded. He already has. The twist a spark, racial justice, a flame they'd fan. The bunker hummed, Jamal waking fully on September 7th, sitting up. "I'm ready." His voice steady, burns healing, chest scarred but beating. A leader forged in fire. Marcus handed him the recorder. "Your story." And Jamal took it. Our story. A promise to fight, to lead, to tear down what he'd endured. Marcus stepped back, retiring. His war done, the Delta legend fading, passing it to a son who'd defy the odds. Aisha smiled. "He's us." And Marcus agreed. The twist a gift, a new beginning in a world still bleeding. Protests raged, Bakersfield a crucible. September 8th, dawning with marches choking highways, voices demanding reform. The feds digging deeper, Reese's network unraveling, Vance's cell a tomb. Marcus watched from afar, the ridge his perch, Aisha beside him. Jamal's bunker a seed planted growing, a resistance they'd never see coming. He'd won, lost, won again, the twist flipping despair to hope, racial hate, a beast they'd starve. Not kill, a war Jamal would wage. The sky darkened, stars piercing, and Marcus exhaled. The fight his sons, the revolution just beginning, Bakersfield a spark that had burned the nation clean. Racist cops smash a black teen until his hands were broken, unaware his father is the feared Delta commander, delivers a raw, unflinching look at systemic racism and the power of resilience. The first lesson is the brutal reality of racial injustice. Jamal Carter, a talented black teen, faces relentless violence from prejudiced cops, his dreams shattered by a system that targets him for his skin color. It's a stark reminder that prejudice isn't just personal, it's institutional, woven into power structures that protect the guilty. Second, Marcus Carter's fight teaches us that justice isn't handed out. It sees through courage and strategy, even when the odds stack high. His Delta Force precision turns a father's love into a weapon, showing that resistance, though costly, can shift tides. Third, the story underscores community complicity, neighbors who watch but don't act, a town that burns its own, highlighting how silence fuels oppression. Yet, the twist of Jamal's survival reveals a fourth lesson. Hope can endure the darkest moments, reborn through sacrifice and cunning. Finally, passing the torch to Jamal signifies that the fight against racism is a relay, not a sprint, demanding new voices to rise where others falter. This tale isn't just a cry against hate, it's a call to stand, to strategize, to persist. What's your takeaway from this saga? Comment below if you think resilience can topple injustice. Hit like if Marcus's battle stirred you. Subscribe for more gripping tales and share to spark the conversation. Thanks for joining this journey. May it inspire you to fight for what's right and build a world where justice isn't a dream but a reality.